Hello, class. So for this final assignment, I chose to do a short presentation on not one specific individual, but on how demographic and demographic changes, in immigration policy was detrimental to the Black community in the post-war years, the Black community as a whole. Thomas Sowell has written extensively on this topic, and he's written extensively on how what's called the Second Great Migration of African Americans from the South to the North, and the 1965 Immigration Act, which did away with immigration quotas dependent upon national origins, how those things negatively affected the Black community. First off, in Sowell's view, he argued that the migration of Southern Black Americans to the northern cities disrupted established Black communities in the North, introducing cultural tensions, the demographic shifts, which took Blacks from the rural South into the northern cities, into the burgeoning suburbs, which were coming up all over the place during the economic prosperity of the post-war years, seeking employment and seeking cheap housing. They brought with them a culture, basically, which they inherited from the South, based on violence and anti-intellectualism and a lack of work ethic. That's a pretty harsh way of putting it, but that's what Sowell argues in Black Rednecks and White Liberals in his book. He says that this demographic pattern established or introduced discontinuities in established Black communities who were not welcoming. They viewed their brethren as a challenge to what they had established, and things which they, as a challenge, competitors to jobs in the job market, competitors for housing. The Immigration Act of 1965 also introduced so many new people from different backgrounds, especially from Latin America, which also introduced cultural, ethnic tensions, the rise of gang violence, notoriously New York City in the 1970s, other major American cities, which we're still dealing with as a nation today. He claims that these immigration patterns and migration patterns within the United States contributed to the rise of urban dysfunction and the rise of crime and the decline of education for both the community and, in general, educational quality. Of course, Sowell links these things to cultural and demographic patterns of change, and not to any overarching progressive narrative such as systemic racism or something like that. Sowell argued that after the 1965 Immigration Act, it increased the competition for Black Americans disproportionately, and it harmed them disproportionately, especially when you had laborers moving to America from Latin America and Asia, whereas before 1965, the quota had been predominantly aimed at bringing in skilled, educated laborers from Northern Europe. He emphasized that the Black communities, the liberal establishment, who were ostensibly on the side of civil rights, were also on the side of this first sort of federalized, intentional wave of mass immigration, that it harmed the Black community in irreparable ways. And that's what he argues. He argues that in several different books, which I'll list below. It's a very interesting take. Sowell's a controversial character, but one that has a lot of insight, one that has a lot of humor, and when he gets unleashed, he's kind of a killer. So, and as a Black academic and economic historian and economist, he had a very unique point of view. So, in other words, he believes that this demographic change in America in the post-war years greatly greatly affected the black community for worse, even though the very people who championed them politically were the ones who were instituting these changes, which were leading to essentially the near complete destruction of the traditional black family. So it's an interesting topic. It's one that can be looked at from a number of different ways. But that's Thomas Sowell's take on it. And yeah, enjoyed the class. Thank you guys. Talk to you later.